Hello, everyone. So this is the first official episode of the AfroKlash podcast. If you've found this podcast, most likely you have followed us on social media or you've been to one of the AfroKlash events in the past. And so this is kind of an upgrade, a version of the event where this way we kind of have a repository of all of these amazing stories of these incredible African women in one place. So you're not just coming to an event, you get your inspiration, but you never get to go back and remember what they said. So this is really a way to capture their stories for life, and so you can always come back to being inspired. So this is the first episode, and what I wanted to do with this episode is really just share a little bit more on what AfroKlash is, who I am, why I started why I'm starting this brand, why I'm starting the podcast. So I'm going to be interviewing a lot of great people, but for this episode, I asked my friend Sade to come on and interview me, so I can share a little bit more about what this is and what I do and what the purpose of this is. And so we've been friends for quite some time, and I thought she would be the perfect person to interview me for this. And so I'm so excited to have you, Sade. Hello.
Hello. Thank you. I just want to say, honestly, it's an honor that I was even asked to do this.
Come on.
I'm going to just be honest. And we kind of said it. This is our first time. And it's definitely giving first date kind of nervous.
It is.
We got this.
We got this.
But yeah, should I tell them how we know each other?
Yeah, let's talk about how we met. I think that's a good way to kind of get us started.
So I met Bosola back in 2018.
2018, crazy.
Right?
5 years ago.
5 whole years.
Yeah.
We met through a mutual friend.
Who says Shadi stole me from her.
Yep. She knows who she is.
She knows who she is.
But we met 5 whole years ago. Bosola was visiting the Bay Area. And at that time, our mutual friend was living in the Bay Area. And I had met her through another mutual friend. And we were all in grad school at the same time. So the Bay Area is home for me. So I was already home going to grad school. But our mutual friend was there from Maryland, going to grad school. Bosola was visiting the Bay Area, and I just remember being like, I've never seen somebody so hyped to visit the Bay Area, but I love it.
I was so excited. I made you all take me to every tourist attraction. I still have photos of us on the San Francisco Bridge, and we did a portrait mode, regular mode, videos, photos, different ways. We posed the hell out of that day.
And honestly, I was just, the vibe of just her being a tourist, I was like, yes. And Bosola was even doing things I've never done. Like, you went to Alcatraz. Was that where you went?
I forgot about that. I did do that. I do all the things. I make sure I do all the things. I did.
It's crazy because one thing the Bay Area people say is, if you know you're from the Bay if you've never been to Alcatraz. So the second she said it, she went to Alcatraz and she was so hype about it. I was like, damn, I love it.
I was. That was a good trip.
It really was.
Yeah.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Like, why would you say, because what I wanted to also ask you, and just from your perspective, and I can share my perspective, because obviously we both meet a lot of people. We met a lot of people in the last 5 years. Before that, why do you feel like we connected and stayed friends?
Honestly, the moment I met Bosola, I was just like, I feel like we're the same.
Yes.
And I remember just even our mutual friend being like, you guys are very similar. I'm not surprised you clicked. Yeah. And your guys' friendship makes sense.
Yeah,
like,
1000%.
Like, why have you been hiding this, girl? It's crazy because I feel like we're very similar in just like how we operate and go about things.
And think about things.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think we could both say we're overthinkers.
1000%. Girl.
We're very detail-oriented people.
Yeah.
And I feel like that was the main thing that I was just like, and I don't even know how I picked up on it.
Yeah.
But I was like,
it's just energy.
Yeah.
It's just energy, yeah.
Yeah. But I was like, I really like her energy.
Yeah.
And we're going to be friends.
I agree. Same. As soon as I left that trip, I remember, I feel like we clicked, exchanged contact instantly, and we just became really good friends. And I think that's why I wanted to have you, because we've talked so much and you've heard so much of the behind the scenes of this journey. You've been such a great support for me. So that's why I thought it was really important, not to just have anyone, but someone that I feel like I can really be comfortable with and talk to, and who has kind of really seen the journey and the progression of what I've been on trying to grow this from the ground up. So thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. Seriously. So let's get into it. So like Bosola said, I'm going to be asking her a few questions. And we really just want this to be a dialogue.
Yeah.
Really want y'all to get the inside scoop into what she's been doing, what she's about to do, what's to come. But Bosola is actually just coming off of her second event called AfroKlash.
Yes.
So we want to recap, sis. Tell us about it.
Oh my God, it was so good. I think because I started I started AfroKlash in 2019, right before the pandemic. It took me a couple years to come back, so just because life was lifing. The pandemic happened. I got to start a new career, moved to a new city, so it took me a while to come back to it. But honestly, it was the best. I mean, it's just coming off fresh of it. I'm still not off of the excitement and the energy that I felt, that everyone felt. I feel like in the room that day, people have still been texting me, sending me messages about how great it was. It was incredible. I mean, the lineup was insane. If you follow us on Instagram, I'm sure you've seen the photos. We had Aneka Julia as a keynote, who is someone that I've been such a fan of for such a long time. And all the panelists, all the speakers were incredible. They just dropped amazing gems. And I think the theme for this year was so personal, which is getting out of your own way. And I feel like even just starting this, I was in my own way for such a long time. And like you said, we're overthinkers of thinking of all the things that could go wrong and all the things that I might not be able to do trying to get this going. That's why it took me so long to get back to it. But it was honestly the best, one of the best weekends of my life. It was so good. It's such a lot. I'm never going to glaze over it and say it's so easy to put on an event and get speakers and, come up with an agenda and all of that. It's a lot. It's a lot of mental, physical, financial investment, but it's always so worth it on the other side when you get people coming up to you and saying, being here changed my life. Being here, I met the person that's going to be my next best friend or next business partner, or this thing that someone said, one of the speakers said, has propelled me to start my business, So I just love community. I love when people get to come together, especially women. We're growing up, especially being African women, we're from a patriarchal society where we're kind of told to be fit into these boxes. And so just being able to create those spaces where people get to come and be themselves and be inspired and go for those dreams that are kind of scary is really just what I wanted to do. And also, like I always say with AfroKlash, like so many incredible women are doing so many amazing things. Like we're all kind of fighting against the typical careers where there's nothing against a typical career, but if there's something you genuinely want to do, we're all kind of pushing against those expectations, clashing against those expectations, as the name says, to do the things that we want to do. And so we're kind of a new generation doing these things for the first time. So I really wanted to create a space, which is really the point of this podcast versus the event, is telling those stories and having a space for the next generation. So someone that's right now wants to be a storyteller, a writer, can listen to a podcast episode where I interview someone that has that story of like, how did you go against your parents, maybe saying you should be a doctor or a lawyer, and how did you believe in yourself to get to the point where you thought this was something that you could do, and that they could always say, Mom, if you don't believe it, listen to this podcast episode that someone recorded and they told their story of how they made it and how much they're making now and how well they're doing. So that's really the purpose of it, is just having that repository that's going to live on far beyond any of us, where people can come back to and say, my story was told, and then also someone else can find some benefit in my story. So
I love that.
Yeah.
I really love that. I don't know if you heard Bosola said, she said weekend.
Yeah.
This 2023 event was a 2-day event, which was an addition to last year's event.
Yeah.
But let's walk it back a bit.
Okay.
We want to know a bit about just the purpose. Like, we want to know just the beginnings of AfroKlash. You said 2019 was your first event. Yeah. Took some time to get back. Yeah. You just got the second event last weekend. But yeah, tell us how you got started.
I think I was just sitting with my girlfriends, I think, one weekend, and everyone was saying they wanted to do this thing. Like that year, I feel like 2019, everyone was just so inspired. Like I had a cousin that wanted to start a travel business, another friend wanted to start a consulting business, someone wanted to be a photographer, creative, all these kind of different things. And they're like, oh, but this person online, I'm so inspired by her. She does it, but I don't know how I can. How did she do it? How did she get so successful? How did she get to where she was? There was just such a gap in the stories of like not being able to read. I mean, everyone's not so accessible, which is how things should be. Of course, you shouldn't have access to everyone, but how can they find a point of reference? Like there's no blueprint for a lot of the things that people want to do, especially if it's not the norm of like, you go to school, go to undergrad, go to grad school, get this certificate, get this degree, you're going to be good. Like a lot of these things, even with this, right? I'm just winging it. There's no blueprint of exactly if you do A, B, C, and D, you're going to have guaranteed success. Yeah. So that's kind of how it started, just sitting around with friends that all wanted to kind of start businesses, wanted to do new things, but they either felt, I can't do it, imposter syndrome, anxiety, overthinking. So I think it's not even just hearing stories of, okay, this is how I did it, but also just feeling inspired that the people that you also look up to, they have insecurities, they have imposter syndrome. And that's, I think this event was so impactful, I think, for that reason, where it just wasn't someone just coming to share business steps of how to be successful. It was like people were really, it was such a vulnerable space where these incredibly successful women were sharing stories of, I also go through these things. I also, people with hundreds of thousands of followers on social media struggle with imposter syndrome and doubt. So I think it was such a great space for people to hear from these people that they're inspired by and say, if they feel that I can do it. So that was the genesis of it, just sitting in that room, hearing from friends that wanted to start businesses, feeling like they just didn't know where to go. They just felt uninspired. They felt like everyone was doing so much better than they were. And I'm someone that's just, I'm so I read books obsessively. I listen to podcasts obsessively. Yeah. I go to all of these events. So I would go to all of these events, and there's so many incredible ones, but I just felt like I wasn't always seeing the stories that I wanted to be told. I wanted to hear from people, and not to say that someone that's not African cannot have some impact on me. Of course, I'm so inspired by Issa Rae and Michelle Obama, and there's so many people in this life that inspire me. But I think when you feel like someone that maybe came from the same place that I did, that probably has a similar background, that went through the same struggles and expectations, it feels a little bit more achievable. Like, yeah, I can also do it because this person is a couple of degrees away from me, or they had the same background. So that was really where AfroKlash came from, where there's so many incredible events and communities for women of color, but the niche and the unique thing about AfroKlash is that we're amplifying the voices of African women specifically across industries. So it's not just fashion, or it's not just medicine, or if you want to be a musician or a writer. It's all of these different things, and collecting all of these stories for people across all of these industries and generations to be inspired. And so that's really where it came from. It's something that I wanted, and that's what they always say. You have to create something that you genuinely wanted. Every time I put on an event, I tell all the women that come to speak and say, I'm such a genuine fan of you all. I can't even believe all of you said yes, because it's something I genuinely want. I want to be in those spaces. I want to hear their stories, and I feel like that always comes through, because I'm always just genuinely so excited when I get to hear them say yes and hear them speak. I take notes. I listen to their stories, because I think it's so important for people to be transparent, that it's not always so easy to just do the thing that just because you have an idea and you're passionate about something doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of commitment, but you can definitely do the thing that you want to do. So I think that's just, long story short, that was a monologue, but that's really where it came from, is just hearing a lot of people feeling like, in myself as well, I can't do this thing because it's so hard, or everyone else seems to make it seem so easy. And then you really get into these rooms and you hear these stories, and it's like, everyone kind of goes through the same thing. So yeah, that's kind of how it all came about.
I think it's just so beautiful how AfroKlash came about, or the idea of AfroKlash came about just talking amongst girlfriends. Yeah. And you guys having a relatable experience. And then you turning that into AfroKlash being a space where people could share their experiences, and then people could also relate to them. I think it's just beautiful seeing how it came about. And how it came to actually be AfroKlash. Yeah. It's funny because we were talking about this last night at dinner. Yeah. You were telling me just the difference between starting your first event, like putting it all together, making it happen. You were comparing it to this event just this past weekend, your second event. Yeah. And it was just interesting hearing the differences. Yeah. So maybe just tell us about what went into this event, just maybe the differences between the two.
Yeah. I think people always say, because we both, we're both homeowners now, and I always tell people, I say, I'm so glad when I was buying my house, I didn't know anything. I did no research. I just was going to buy a house. I did all the things I needed to do, because if I'd known all of the things that would come up in that process, I probably wouldn't have done it. So I think that's what made the first event. It wasn't easy necessarily, but I wasn't as stressed, because I had no measuring tool. I just did the thing because I had an idea and I just did it. Like I was sharing with you, I went through planning for this event. I went to look at all the old emails and the decks. It was ugly, horrible. I didn't edit anything. Nothing was pretty. I just did it. I just put it out there. I was 26. I was so young. I didn't have so much. I didn't care so much what other people thought. I didn't care so much I was so incredibly excited and passionate. I just did it. I just sent out like 50 emails to people. I want you to come speak at my event. And of course it was still thorough and I was still very passionate, all of those things. So I think that's the beauty of being naive about the thing. So I think sometimes when you have an idea, of course, be prepared and do some research. But I think we've talked about this. That's a little bit of my detriment where I over-research. And I didn't do it back then. I think that's what made it a little less stressful. So I think, but then going into it and doing it and going through the process, now I had a little bit of background. So I think that made me a little bit more stressed, and probably why it took me so long to come back to it, in addition to all the other things that were going on in my life, was because I knew that I didn't want to, I wanted to level up what I had done before. The first one was incredible. We had, dream speakers. It was so far beyond what I thought it could be. And of course, when you do the next one, you want it to be bigger and better and shinier. So I put so much pressure on myself to make it so much more than it was. And that came through in the process. It was, but I think the beauty of this one was, since then I got a new career. I was a project manager. So I put a lot of that into it. I created a project plan. I really planned more, and I learned so much from the past event, what to do, what not to do, how to plan better, what I should prepare for. So I think that definitely helped. But I think the difference was I was just so naive the first time, of not knowing anything. I did very little research, whereas this one, I worked with a life coach. I'd researched the industry. So I'd done just so much more research of what other people were doing. So of course that influenced my decisions, and making sure that I wanted to rise to the quality of an event that I wanted to go for. So I think that was just the difference in it. They both came out so beautiful, and the impact is still the same. It's just, for me, mentally, it was a harder process just because I've done it once before and I wanted to improve on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned, you took a little bit of time to, come back and bring, the second event of AfroKlash. But I just want to take a moment and just recognize there's so much beauty in the fact that you took your time.
Yeah,
1,000%. And even you explaining just what you did in that time, that is growth. And you said you wanted quality.
Yes.
And you brought quality.
Yeah.
So I just want to point out the fact that there's so much beauty in the fact that you're like, no, I'm taking my time. I'm actually going to take my time and do this. I don't want it to be a forced thing, a rush thing.
Exactly.
And look.
Exactly. And to that, I remember I was talking to one of the speakers planning for this, and I was worried, and I was saying, will people come, or will they feel like because I hadn't done one in so long, should they still support it and everything? And she said, listen, when you have a dream or a passion on your heart and you put it down, it will always be there for you. And it will be there for you when you're ready to pick it back up. Sometimes we feel like you just need to do the thing. Even if I was so much was going on in my life. So much was going on in the world in 2020. There was just no space for me. I couldn't even think about doing another one. I just could not. So to your point, so much has happened. And I saw that. I remember after this event this past weekend, I was sitting with my sister and I was saying, I was such a different person. I was the first event, I was so overwhelmed. I was so drained. I hardly remembered anything that happened. I wasn't present. I did it. I was done. And then it's been 5 days. All I've done is look at the photos, the videos. I rewatched. I'm still living in it because I was so present and I was so excited. So I think, to your point, I've grown so much, where sometimes just because you have an idea, you may not be ready. You may not be ready. And that's also something to think about, because I know what I want this to be and I know what I want the impact to be. There was some growth that I needed to do to get to the point where I can not only put this out, but stay consistent with it and deliver the kind of quality that I know that this could be. So I think that's such a great point, where sometimes, of course, you're hard on yourself. And I was just like, it's been so long. Do I even deserve to bring this thing back? But I needed that space to really grow in all the areas of my life, financially, mentally, personally, that I think I'm finally in that place now where I can confidently show up for this thing in the way that I feel like I should.
I love that. And I just love how relatable and how easy it is to connect what you're doing with AfroKlash. AfroKlash. My bad. With everything you're just doing in your personal life, and then everything you're also doing career wise. Even just your statement about just sometimes you just need to like just do it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I feel like that's applicable. I know it's applicable for me in so many ways. And that's something that I know I've heard Bosola even tell me as it relates to things I tell her I'm trying to do personally.
Yeah.
So it's just nice to be able to like see what you're doing with AfroKlash, but also like it's easily relatable to just, you know, our everyday lives as it relates to just like our day-to-day, but also just like career.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think, you know, like we said earlier, we're both such overthinkers, and it's such a plus because we see everything from every angle. That's the only reason why I can put on an event the way that I did, because I see everything. I plan it so well because I've overthought every scenario. So it's a pro, but it's also a con where it's to your detriment. You know, you're thinking about things that haven't even happened, and that's where your anxiety crops up. So it's something that, you know, we're both trying to learn to manage, because it makes us who we are. It really does. Like, overthinking, it's a superpower. It really is, that so many people don't have. It's what makes me a great project manager. It's what makes me a great planner, because I see everything. I see everything. I know what all needs to be involved to make something successful. But at the same time, you're easily overwhelmed because you see all of the things. So I think that's something that I've also had to work on through therapy and coaching, is it's almost finding that balance between I want to use the overthinking to my benefit and not to my detriment, you know, and trying to balance that out where I still want to do the thing. I want to do it well, but I don't want to hold myself back because it's not exactly perfect, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could definitely relate to that.
Yeah.
Leveraging therapy to help manage your anxiety.
Oh, girl, talk about it.
When I say I can relate, baby. So I recently started therapy.
Yeah.
And what drove me to start therapy was my anxiety.
Yep.
And it's crazy because it took me a long time to admit this, but I was in denial that I had anxiety. And I was even in denial when I actually sought out kind of just medical advice to even be diagnosed. I'm going to be very transparent right here. So I also was recently diagnosed with ADHD sometime last year. Yeah. And even when I was diagnosed with ADHD, and I was also told, you know, I have like anxiety, I was still in denial. I was like, I don't know anxiety.
Yeah. Who
are you
trying
to prescribe me, you know, to manage my anxiety? I'm like, no.
Yeah.
But when I say therapy has done so much, just even acknowledging where anxiety shows up for me. Yes. But then also getting just the tools and techniques to manage it.
That's it.
Yo, I'm only like several months into therapy, but when I say like, I feel like my anxiety, it really is. Yeah. Like my anxiety is like now, like it used to be maybe like, in terms of if I had to put it on a scale of 1 to 10 of how much of a problem it was in my daily life, it was definitely a 20. Yeah. But when I tell you, I've just even changed in terms of like, okay, like I notice when my anxiety is creeping up.
Always.
And just,
you know.
You really do. Yeah. And, you know, I used to ignore it, but now I know. Yes. And it shows up in so many different ways.
Yes. In every part of your life.
It really does. Yeah. Like it's not just, you know, specific to one area. Like I know for me, it showed up in social settings, showed up in work. Yeah. Showed up even in my relationship.
I was going to say, I feel like for me, the biggest thing was relationships with everyone, my boss, my friends, romantic partners, all of it. I overthought everything. Everything was an issue. If someone took too long to text me back, if a boss's email didn't have an LOL, my anxiety would just read into scenarios in all of the craziest ways. And to your point, it's not something that you just go to therapy and you're done. You're healed. It's you know, it's a daily thing. But I think to your point, the thing that you get from therapy and coaching, and we'll talk about that as well, is like tools. I have actual tools, and I was just having this conversation with a friend after the event, you know, because she was asking, you know, how did you get to the point, even despite having all of these things, where you could just execute? And it's the tools, because now, to your point, I feel when I'm having an anxious moment, I know this is not reality. You're just making these things up. This is just your anxiety speaking to you. Yeah. And I think making sure, and someone said this actually at the event, is, you know, if you have a 9-to-5 and you're trying to start a business, or you're trying to be an entrepreneur or whatever, you have to get your mindset right. 100%. That is the number one thing. Like, don't think because you're at your 9-to-5 and you have this boss that pisses you off, and I'm just going to go work for myself and I don't have to have a boss. Yeah. That negative mindset whether or not you were right, it's going to go with you. You have to get your mindset right. And I think, like we were saying earlier, I think that's the biggest thing that I've worked on in the last couple of years since the last event that has really, really, really changed my life, that allowed me to be so present for this event. And I think, like you were saying, it's therapy, whatever tool that you need that you feel like is really going to help you is so important, because doing something, having an idea and putting it out, it's exhausting. It looks so shiny when all the photos are out and everyone's commenting. It's so mentally draining, especially when you're starting it out alone. You know, I have such a great community of friends and family that are always there to back me up and support. But at the end of the day, it's your idea. It's you're so, no one's going to ever be as passionate about it as you. So if you're not in the place where you can push through, because I had moments and I'm like, no one's buying a ticket. No one's coming. No one is going to come for this. We're going to be talking to an empty room. And I would just be sitting on the floor losing it. And I would just have to remember and go watch like old clips from my coach. And that is a circumstance. It's a neutral circumstance. And you're having a thought about something that isn't true. And then because you have that thought, it's making you feel anxious. And the result is now you think your event isn't going to go well. So now you stop promoting it because you think no one's coming. And if you don't promote it, no one is going to come because you're not talking about it. Yeah. So that's one of the biggest things I learned this year, was just that model of every circumstance is neutral. The result that you get out of every situation is based on your mind. You're going to create that result always. You're the only person that has the power to create the result based on what you think about that. If someone comes in and calls you an asshole or pushes you to the floor, whatever thought you have is going to be equal to the result. So that's the biggest thing that I've learned, with therapy and coaching and all of those things that have really helped me, where you have to get your mindset right, I think, before you start anything, that you want to do. So, yeah.
You know what? I'm just going to point out something, because I just love the fact that you are being so transparent.
Yeah.
Because if y'all look at Bosola's IG, her content is always giving. So you said you see photos on IG and it looks all, glitz and glam, but there's definitely a BTS behind the scenes.
Listen to me.
And I love that you really just shared, no, you had moments where it's you've lost it. Am I going to be talking to an empty room?
Yeah, I was on the floor, tears, crying, losing it, sleepless nights. No one's going to come. No one's going to come to this. It's so hard, but you just have to. And I think that's another thing I learned, where I was so invested in the result, where the only way I can have impact with AfroKlash is if there's 50 people in the room, if there's 100 people in the room, if this thing's sold out. If one person comes and that person gets everything that they need to do the thing that they want to do, to start a business, that is also impact. Impact isn't measured by the number of people that come and, pat you on the back and post you on social media. And I think that's something that I really had to get away from, because that's how I was measuring myself, was this is only going to be deemed a success if 100 people come. I was tying my value and the worth of this incredible thing to ticket sales and the people that were coming and all of that kind of thing. And of course you want to impact a large number of people. But even if 100 people come, because sometimes 100 people can come and they're like, I hated this event, or it's not for me, or it's not my thing. But if one person comes, that is still impact. And that was something that I had to work on this year, was, every time I put something out, I'm like, I can't do this. Nobody's coming. I'm not selling any tickets. I don't want to do this. It's too hard. That really think about the why. And that's what everyone says. Simon Sinek, he's trending on, he always trends, start with your why. And I always had to go back to that. It's not to just sell out events for that. It's the impact. It's telling these stories, putting these stories out there. So even if one person comes and listens to all of these stories, of course it's going to be hard to speak to an empty room, but that doesn't negate the level of impact that you're going to have. So that's something I had to think about as well for myself, where it's a journey for you. You really do have to work. Entrepreneur, I always say I don't ever want to be an entrepreneur. It's so hard. I don't want to be an entrepreneur. It's not my thing. But I think I really had to work on my mindset to be comfortable with it, because me in 2019, me at the first event, I was a mess, and it was so much smaller than this, But and I was saying to my coach this year, I'm terrified of leveling this up, because I know it's only going to get harder. If you have an event with 100 people, it's different from an event with 500 people, with 1,000 people. So the level of expectation is going to get higher. And I'm like, if I can't put on a 50-person event, 100-person event without losing it, how am I gonna grow? You have to work on yourself. You have to work on yourself to get to the place that you want to be. So I think that's also so important to remember. To your point, everything looks nice on Instagram. Mm-hmm. But it's so much more than that. It's so much more that goes into it, for sure.
Oh, I love that. Therapy works, y'all.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
10 out of 10. Highly recommend.
Highly recommend.
So I know you touched a bit on just some of the fears or insecurities that you had going into it.
Yeah.
Tell us about some of the hurdles.
Ooh, I mean, the hurdles, I think people always thought, like, even I was talking to someone and she was like, how hard is it to get speakers? I think if you're genuinely passionate about something and you really go to people with your why and you're something you're excited about and they feel like they can trust you, that was almost the easiest part. And I'm not trying to jinx myself, but so far, it's been the easiest part is getting people to say yes to it, to come and speak. I think the biggest hurdle, and I feel like my mind was the biggest hurdle. That was number one. And I think it's just all the logistics of it. So much goes into it. I created a project plan. It's like a 50-step project plan to put this together. And that's just me. I don't have a large team, so imagine if so many other people were involved in it. I think it's the logistics, the big things and the little things, the venue, the menu, but it's also the little thing, like what is the agenda going to be? I have to come up with the topics, the theme, the colors, the branding, the logo, the social media. I always describe it as you're carrying all of these balls in your hand and you cannot shake, because if you drop one, everything else is going to drop. And so your brain is trying to keep track of all of the little things. You have to send this reminder email. You have to send out this marketing email. You have to post on this day, post on that day, send this reminder, refresh, reset. It's so many little things that go into it that people might take for granted, seeing the final result. So I think that's probably a lot of the hurdle. But I think the more I do it, it gets easier because I know what it takes, so, and I have a plan now that I can copy and paste into future events. So I think it's all a learning process. When you start something, of course, that's going to be the hardest time. But I think that is a hurdle. It's just those logistics behind the scenes that people don't see to have a good experience, getting the venue, the chairs, who's going to get the mic, who's going to do the music, what music do we want to have, the playlist. Remembering all of those little things that people don't really pick up on, but that really elevates their experience, I think is the biggest thing for sure.
See, y'all, that's just one pro to being an overthinker.
Yeah, 1,000% of many pros.
Seriously. But I want to walk it back a bit because you said something about, you mentioned a few times your coach.
Oh, yeah.
And I just want to take a moment to even talk about that because I feel like and I don't want to, group us like that, but I know me as a Black woman. Yeah. Like getting a coach, like I haven't really thought about that. Yeah. Honestly, until I started to climb up the corporate ladder. Yeah. But even now I think about it just in the context of just a career coach. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, well, those are only, people who work in, C-suite roles in, these fancy startups. I'm not there yet. But tell us a bit more because I think you've just told me about your experience so far and I'm just like, yo, I need a coach. Yeah. We should all have coaches. Yeah. So tell us.
So I feel like that's why I read so much because I'm one of my Clifton strengths is input. I take in so much information. There's tools out there to really help you. And sometimes, we all feel like we have to do these things alone. Just figure it out on your own. But there's people willing to support you. I got a career coach when I got this new career that I'm in that helped me with my resume, interview skills. That's what got me the job that has put me into the life position that I am now, working with that coach. Before I started this event this year, I got a life coach, and someone was asking me recently the difference between a therapist and a life coach.
Tell us.
And I think the biggest difference, and I was trying to say, I think a therapist, so say, for example, you say I struggle with anxiety. Mm-hmm. The first question a therapist is going to ask you is, tell me about your childhood. Tell me about your parents. Did you have a great marriage? Your sibling. They're really trying to get to the root of the core of how you came to be the person that you are. A life coach is more so just kind of meeting you where you are. Okay, you have anxiety about this specific thing that you're trying to do. You're trying to start a business, and you're telling yourself you can't do it because no one's going to come. Your life coach, and this is what she's just you have no proof of that. You're telling me that so I remember the first session, she's like, why haven't you done it? And I said, I'm overwhelmed. She said, you're saying you're overwhelmed, but you've done nothing. What is overwhelming you? You've not sent a single email. You haven't asked a single question. You don't have a theme. You don't have an idea, but you're overwhelmed. Let's talk about that. So really you're overwhelmed because it's all in your mind. And so she gave me the tools to say, when you get to that point of overwhelm or anxiety, these are the tools. It's all in your mind. So that's kind of the difference, where a therapist is trying to really find the root of the problem and talk you through your life story and how you came to be, and just finding those patterns in your life that kind of make you be the person that you are, whereas a life coach is taking a scenario in your life and is trying to coach you through how to level up to the next level of success. And so I think that was really helpful for me, because I've been in therapy for a long time, and I've gotten a lot of tools around that, but I needed help with this specific thing that I was trying to do, and someone that has that business perspective. And that's another difference, where a therapist is a psychologist, so they really are just talking about your childhood and your life, but at least a life coach I work with is from a business perspective, and really trying to are you researching your industry? You say you want to do this thing, but you don't really know who your competitors are. So she really gave me advice on if you want to have a stake in this industry, you need to know who else is in the industry, what they're doing, learn from them, research them, really get to know their blueprint. And so she really helped give me the tools of, not just having an idea. Because I remember I would always go to her and say, I just want to have impact. She said, Bosola, that is great. We all want to have impacts, but how do you want to make this profitable? How do you want to grow this? What is your next step? Because, you want to have this one event, but then is that it? What else are you going to do? Are you really thinking about the big picture? So that was really helping me get out of my own way and get out of my head of really thinking about the big picture to do all the things that I want to do. So she's been incredible. And I hope to one day have her on the podcast just to talk about our story. But she's really, really been such an impactful part of my life. And I'm so, so thankful to have worked with her, because I think she had a great hand in me being the person that I was and the way that I showed up at this year's event, for sure.
Well, shout out to her.
Shout out to her. Yeah.
My girl told y'all, she gave you a description of, definition, of what a career coach is, or just a coach in general, what a therapist is. So don't say you don't know.
Don't say you don't know. Get to it.
So we're obviously doing a podcast.
Yes.
There's obviously, an annual event called AfroKlash. Mm-hmm. But we want to know. Why the podcast and the event?
Yeah, I think I said this a little in the intro. I think the event is so beautiful, right? Because you're in a physical space and you just feel, the energy that day was like, this past weekend for this event was so incredible. You get to connect with people and you get to hear stories, and I love it. I loved it. I cannot wait for the next one. I'm already planning for it. But I think the thing is, you come to that event, you feel that energy, and it's done. You go home. You may remember, you may not remember. You may take the gems that you heard, you may not. You kind of leave that space. You get on with your life, as you should. Yeah. So I think I wanted to add something to that, where, there's a podcast now where if someone that you really love comes on the podcast and you hear something like, oh, that was so good, and you make a note, and then you go on living your life, and then maybe you're struggling with anxiety, for example, and I have someone come on, like a therapist, and come on and talk about anxiety. You get to come back to that episode again and again and again and again. You don't just lose it after that one day being in that physical space. And also I don't have to limit the impact just by the people that get to come to the room. Like, for example, I had an event in Maryland, and say someone lives in Kentucky and really loved Daneka now, but they don't have the access to come and fly down, but they really wanted to have access to her story and hear what she wanted to say. That's what the podcast can do now, is you can just log on any time of the day on your ride home, while you're making dinner, and get to listen to that and still be inspired. So I didn't want it to just be that short couple of hours where we get to be in that space together, which is beautiful. And I'm so excited to keep doing that. But also this is just another element to that, where now these stories can live on beyond us, where someone that's 10 right now doesn't know what they want to do might find one of these people in a couple of years and say, I wonder what their story was. I wonder how they built this from scratch. And they can just go on Spotify or Apple and Google that person's name and find a podcast episode and say, wow, that's such an incredible story. I'm inspired, So I think that's the point of it, is not so just so we don't lose that impact outside of that physical space that we're going to take up that day.
You're spoiling us. We're spoiled.
Yeah.
So we have the podcast.
Yeah.
We've gotten 2 AfroKlash events so far.
Yeah.
What can we expect in the future?
More events for sure. I just asked people where they want to see another one. So I'm trying to start planning for that for next year, for sure. And then just, have more people come on. Someone suggested, can we do a book club where we read,
I like that.
Invite, author, African women authors, and do a series on that. So just a lot to come. I think next year, we're going to have more in-person events, virtual events. So people, again, from anywhere, no matter where they're located, can log on and listen to these people speak. And so, a lot to come. I'm very, very excited. So the podcast for sure will probably, so this episode we're recording right now, right after the event in 2023, you'll probably hear this early 2024, so that we can keep the momentum going with other podcast episodes. And so, but we just wanted to capture this moment. We didn't want to lose the momentum coming off of the energy off of the current event. And so we wanted to get this recorded. So, lots to come next year, and I'm really excited about it.
You heard it, y'all. She said, stay tuned, 2024. This episode is going to drop. So we're going to wrap it on up. We're going to wrap it on up. What do you want the impact of AfroKlash to be?
I think we've touched on it a little, like through the conversation, but I think it's really for people to feel less alone, to not to feel like, whether it's anxiety or overthinking or imposter syndrome, or that you're not the only person that feels that way. And then 2, AfroKlash, right? It means African women who are clashing against societal expectations to live the life of their dreams. Because a lot of us, come from, we're a new generation, right? A lot of our parents had the same, they have expectation of us to have a certain type of career. So I think the impact is really that if someone wants to do something, even if you wanted to be a doctor or a lawyer, a pharmacist, an accountant, people are doing it in such different ways. Like, we had a friend of yours that we just met last night who's a pharmacist, but she's charting such a unique path. She's also a realtor and doing all of these incredible things in addition to her 9 to 5. So getting a platform for their stories and for people to just feel less alone that, even if I wanted to be a doctor, how does she do it where maybe she's also monetizing it in this way and telling her story in this way? So it's really just capturing the stories, I think, for future generations to have benefit from, but then also to just build a community of women who feel like they have other people that they can relate to and just feel connected. We're in such a time, especially post-pandemic, right? So many people moved and a lot has happened where we're just, with social media, we're such an isolated world now where everyone is just doing their own thing and everyone feels like everyone is living such a better life because social media, everyone looks like they're having a great time with their friends, and I'm just home scrolling and I have no friends, So especially with those in-person events, it's just to build that community where you can meet your next best friend. And because we're in the most disconnected time ever. Research just said we're all just so disconnected. We all feel like everyone is living such a much better life than we have. So it really is just building that community, making people feel less alone, getting those stories out there and making people feel like they can relate to other people and just feel like they can connect. So I think connection, relatability, community is really the biggest thing. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Connection, relatability, and community.
Yeah.
This was awesome.
This was so good. Thank you so much. Honestly,
Thank you for having me.
I cannot
honestly.
Y'all. We're gonna get emotional. I'm so thankful for you. Honestly, our friendship has been such a rock for me, especially planning this event. Like, we plan to have weekly check-ins, but life be lifing.
Girl, life be lifing.
We couldn't do the weekly check-ins, but whenever we could, and I feel like that was always no love lost if one of us couldn't pick up the phone. But whenever we did and we had our check-ins, it was such a rock for me, just knowing that I had someone there to support me and I could bounce my anxiety off of and say, this is what I'm going through and I feel this way and all this is happening, and you just being like, Bosola, you got this. I'm so proud of you. You can do this. And so I'm so glad to have had this moment with you for life, that we're always going to have this episode to go back on and remember this conversation. So thank you. Thank you so much for being here.
Of course. My chest. Last thing I'm going to say is I'm going to put in a plug for AfroKlash on IG.
Yes.
And another thing I'm going to say is all the prep and promo leading up to AfroKlash, I jokingly told Bosola, I was like, it's giving social media team.
Okay.
Even though she was a team of one. I need y'all to go follow AfroKlash on IG.
Tell
at
them.
AfroKlash. It's right up here.
Yes.
Go give it a follow.
Yes. Thank you so much. Appreciate you. Love you.
Love you too.